President Jimmy Carter's funeral was like an episode of The Crown, thick with power dynamics and avoidant activity. We're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into how those dynamics played out and what the energy means between all of these very important people. This is Inspo Radio. Let's do this. So let's dive right in. I have put together a few different clips that really help to highlight the power dynamics, the little micro expressions and aggressions, and micro joys, right? There are some really light, lovely moments within this. So I want to highlight all of those for you in real time so that you can really see that you can read energy in real time, but it does take a heightened level of awareness. So let's start off. Obama has just come in and he's finished greeting everyone in the row behind him. At this point, he has not greeted Donald Trump, acknowledged him in any way, made any kind of eye contact, and yet they both know that they are in the room. So here we go. So Obama's already greeted the back row and hasn't spoken to Trump, and he's listening here because Trump has spoken to him first. Power dynamic. Okay, now you see already Obama has his program out. That's very fast to get your program out. Sit down immediately, pull the program out, start flipping through it from the back. Now that's part of how you know it's an avoidant activity. Now I do want to slow this piece down just a little bit because you can really see how it highlights the difference in where their energy is going. Obama's energy is going down and into the program, into his hands, and Trump's energy is coming from the root. He's leaning from the hips all the way down the body. So there's so much more of his energy that is leaning into the conversation until that moment, until the wince. Obama's setting a boundary with his hand, and now his attention is forward, away from Obama. Notice Trump's square shoulders and a lopsided smile. That's contempt. And here comes W. Strut, chest puffing, heart forward, overconfident. Yes, this love tap, beautiful. And then back to these two. See it again, that lean and then the lean back. Now, Obama's focus is down. He's laughing, but he's not conceding his full attention. And Trump really leans in to him again. Here comes Kamala. Strong gait, but downcast gaze, which it's a funeral. Can't blame her for that. It's a show of strength. And there's no exchanges of nodding. There's no smiles. There's no greetings whatsoever. And there's a lot of tense mouths and that uncomfortable touch of Laura Bush's behind her. And she's clocking everybody else. Check out Laura Bush. And then we see the moment, this time through, watch Melania. She's watching Kamala, and then she responds as well, pursing her lips, gulping, and exhale. And then we come back to Kamala, and she's immediately into her avoidant activity, right into that program. Let's take a second look, slow down. So that's Bill Clinton that she looks toward, raises the eyebrows, purses the lips, dismisses, turns away. Obama's watching that happen, as are the Bushes. And Laura Bush leans back, checks in. And then here's the moment. Everyone's sitting in silence. Obama speaks. Kamala hears it. Think, oh, who's he talking to? Not me. Turns around. Tension in the mouth, tension in the back of the neck. The lips purse, a deep sigh you saw there, and then immediately into the avoidant activity. Get me out of here, dissociate, let me go and read this program and not take in what is happening around me. So we start off this dynamic when we're looking at how Trump sits, Obama comes in, doesn't make any effort to acknowledge Obama, not to shake his hand. You would think that he was probably going to spend his time avoiding Obama, and yet he doesn't. And the reason he doesn't is because there is admiration there. And you can see that admiration in that center line of action. When somebody is really leaning in toward you, there is no avoidance in that whatsoever. And the immediacy with which Trump speaks to Obama, the second Obama lands on the chair, there's communication. And then he responds to that without giving full attention, There isn't really any fixed eye contact. There's not any physical contact between them. And so Obama maintains his power within this dynamic, whereas Trump is really trying to keep this interaction, this attention going. And then once Obama gets into it and gets comfortable, he does begin to initiate parts of the conversation while still not conceding any of his power by maintaining his connection either to the program in his hand or to his own focus in the room. And when that moment actually gets uncomfortable, when Kamala comes in, it makes a lot of sense to me why he starts talking to Trump in that moment, because it is a noticeably uncomfortable moment. Everyone is tight in that moment. Now let's talk about avoidant activity in general. There's a lot of people flipping through programs without much reading going on. It is one of the things that we do in a social contract where we are required to be there, but it also, similar to having a drink in your hand at a party, it helps you feel occupied, more comfortable, less static in your energy, that you have somewhere to put your focus instead of on the other people in the room, especially in a dynamic like this where you are, of course, at a funeral service and the way that you should be behaving is different than you would behave at a party. And yet the dynamic is quite light in the room when everyone else comes in except for Kamala and Joe Biden. Now, that could be because of the proximity to the start of the event, right? The tone shifts. In fact, there's a stop in the music when Kamala comes in. So the room is pretty much silent as she's walking in. And that actually heightens the level of attention on her and her lack of softness, I will call it, because she comes in looking very strong. Shoulders are broad. Walk is very deliberate. It is not overly slow and it's not overly quick. It is taking the amount of time that she chooses to take to get to her seat. It holds and commands a lot of power, and she doesn't concede any niceties, right? Which would be a way of reducing one's power in a social dynamic like this. Smiling, greeting, and nodding. We see a lot of that actually coming from Al Gore at different points, which is actually nice to see because he doesn't have any interest in holding on to any power. And so you really see him reaching out and creating dynamic conversation with those around him. But it's quite a different level of engagement for everyone else. And by level of engagement, I'm really talking about the ability to give away some of your rapport so that you can have greater relationships in this dynamic? Or do you hold on to your power so that you have a greater perceived dynamic for the public? That is the game that is really being played between all of these people. Everyone's very aware that there are cameras on them. This is a state funeral. It is an episode of The Crown. We wear our best. We play the game. We participate in the societal act. But what we see is part of political theater. When anyone knows that they are being watched, there is that dynamic of the voyeur. And so we will continue to see that play out as we deep dive into these different sections of this funeral. I think one of the most important moments, and it's a moment that a lot of people have drawn a lot of attention to, that there is a moment where Trump is really focused on Obama. Obama's head is down. He's very avoidant in his gaze, but he is listening. He is taking in, but he doesn't concede any eye contact. He doesn't open himself up to the interaction, though he is participating, right? Because not participating would be more of an incident. It would provide a different kind of political theater. But instead, the way in which this dynamic shakes out has everything to do with how it begins. The fact that Obama sits down and Trump immediately starts to engage him in conversation changes the entire dynamic that they had previously been in, which was cold. There was no greeting, there was no acknowledgement. But then as soon as they are isolated, that is when Trump sees the opportunity to ingratiate himself, to create a dynamic of inclusiveness. Okay. This goes back to something about Trump that I think is really years old and has borne out over much of his history. That one of the major gripes that he had as just a New Yorker was not being accepted into society, not being accepted into the upper echelon, not being accepted into the political framework. And this is an opportunity to assert himself into that political framework. And who holds the most power in the political framework? Obama. Now, regardless of the fact that Joe Biden is the sitting president as of today, and Kamala is the sitting vice president as of today, Obama is still the most popular person in the Democratic Party, and arguably the most popular Democrat for Republicans, or people who have voted Republican in recent years. Many of those people, because of the absolute real landslide win that Obama had, a lot of those people who voted for Trump in the past few cycles also were Obama supporters. Now, maybe not to a huge degree, but there is a level of crossover, right? There's that level of crossover of the Obama voter who was a Bernie supporter and then ultimately a Trump voter. So there is this way of using the power that Obama wields, and Trump really has always had a dynamic of wanting to pull the kind of power, the kind of admiration that Obama gets. And I believe that that is because that there is some real, truthful, basic admiration on Donald Trump's part. I would even go so far as to say envy and or a certain dynamic of jealousy. And we can talk about the difference between envy and jealousy. Jealousy is really about, I want the thing that you have. Envy is about, I want to be who you are. So recognizing the difference in that dynamic, the envy is all about, I want to be revered and loved and respected and thought of as handsome and funny and fun and cool. And those are all of the things that Trump has never been, regardless of the fanaticism that surrounds him. It is a very different thing because it does not cross political party, does not get across that spectrum of tension between the parties themselves. Now, I want to talk a bit about Kamala's entrance and the way that she is received, or rather not received, by the rest of the dignitaries in the first couple of rows. Now, there's something tense about this, and it shows up in everyone's mouths. It shows up in the way that the gazes are going. It shows up in the way that Laura and George Bush are clocking the dynamics between Obama and Trump on one side and Kamala in front of them. They have front row seats literally to this very tense dynamic, and they are watching it play out. And through their own physical tension, smiles, some nervous smiles that come up, some pulled down mouths happen as well, as opposed to the way that their energies are when they first walk in. When W walks in, he's got actually a protective stance. His posture is protective. Shoulders are pulled back, arms are out. Now, he's taking up a lot of space underneath the arms. That's actually something that I like to see. I like to see that the arms are not glued to the rib cage, because that usually suggests that you're not able to breathe very well. In fact, just doing that for myself, I wasn't really able to breathe. But when the arms naturally hang from the body, they allow the ribs to swing wide and to breathe adequately. And we see W come in with a lot of joy. He gives Obama that very familiar touch. And what's important about that familiar touch that George W. Bush gives to Obama is that it has the energy of, yeah, I haven't seen you yet today, but we are close enough in our dynamic that I'm greeting you as though there hasn't been any time since the last time I saw you. We start from a different space. I feel comfortable enough with you, and I know your demeanor enough, and you know mine enough that there is no hesitancy about that really cute little gesture that they had between them. In stark contrast to the dynamic that is apparent on all of their faces once Kamala comes in the room. Now, do they have adverse feelings toward Kamala? This is where this question of attention and power gets really important, because it would be my expectation, based on Kamala's defeat in the election, that she actually holds the sour feeling, not about any of these people, but there becomes a level of embarrassment. You're in this dynamic, not in the position that you had hoped to be in at an event like this. Now, obviously, no one knew that this event would be occurring in this period of time, but that actually heightens it as well. Because what did we just come out of? We just came out of the certification of the election that Kamala herself had to preside over and announce the results. And that is a moment that most of us will never have to experience. And it must be an incredibly humbling one. And in many ways, it could hold the energies of embarrassment. But the important thing to recognize about Kamala is that she does not show fear. In fact, she likes to show strength. And so, in the presence of any actual embarrassment, often that gets covered up with a show of power so that we do not leak out any of our true feeling. So I would say, based on the sternness of her posture, her facial expressions, the amount of eye rolling and sighing that happens with her, there is a suppression going on and a masking that is happening in order to present strength, when the assumption would be poor Kamala. So there is a closing in and a pulling in of her own energy. She does not extend any energy physically or emotionally to anyone else. And that, to me, is really important about this dynamic. So I hope you found this informative. Of course, I will say I am a Californian. I used to live in LA not very long ago. And so I think that it's really important for us to acknowledge that this is something that is still happening. It's still going on. And so for me personally, I think it's really important to extend our energy, our love, our support, and our kindness right now to one another, and especially to those who are affected by the ongoing fires that are happening in LA. And for those of you who are in LA, regardless of whether or not you have had to evacuate, regardless of whether or not you have lost your home, your job, your possessions, even if you are someone who did not lose anything in this tragedy, it is important that you take really good care of yourself emotionally. Take some time to yourself. Take some time to talk to a good friend on the phone. All the text messages of everybody reaching out to you, if you feel the need, give a quick, short response. But please do what you can to reserve your energy and to take time to feel your feelings. If you are holding it together so that your kids don't get sad or scared, take a moment, get into the shower, and feel your feelings. If you are someone who has lost everything or anything, take some time to allow yourself to slowly process. Try not to force yourself back into a dynamic of normalcy. This is probably the hardest thing to do, because you have all these new things that are coming up that you have to deal with an emotional weight. It's really important that you slow down and acknowledge your emotions now, so that this trauma does not embed in your body as tension that then turns into habitual tightness and holding that adjusts and changes and shifts your posture, your facial expressions, your facial dynamics, and your interaction between your mind, body, and your spirit. Holding on to your emotions, your feelings, and suppressing them, creating muscular or emotional armor in order to prevent yourself from feeling as deeply as you must right now, doesn't go away because you're not releasing it. It stays with you when you're not releasing it. And that does not mean that releasing it, making sound, crying, talking to friends is going to make the pain go away. But what it does do is it starts the process of healing. It starts the process of catharsis. It allows the body to purge the energies, the toxins that are no longer useful for the body. So please take some time for yourselves. Stay safe and stay well.